Pode apontar aqui meu estado, cara. Pode muito bem destacar, pessoal. Ela subiu 3 degraus. Pode ter.
Boa noite, boa noite. Muito boa noite a todos, todas e todos. Meu nome é Natasha Félix. Eu vou estar aqui conduzindo esse primeiro momento. É uma alegria imensa, em nome do Sesc, receber todos vocês aqui. Só para conferir, tá todo mundo animado? Cadê aquele salve? Dei o check. Estamos ao vivo agora pelo YouTube do portal Sesc Rio. Estamos também transmitindo ao vivo na área externa da Casa Sesc, no Centro Histórico. Tem muita gente aqui com a gente. A gente está imensamente feliz de receber vocês. Antes de mais nada, eu vou fazer a minha autodescrição. Eu sou uma mulher, uma poeta negra de pele clara, tô com um black arruivado, meio aloirado, vestindo uma camiseta com o rosto da também imensa Erykah Badu. Tô maravilhosa também, vestindo uma saia preta e um coturno preto também. Eu gostaria de avisar algumas coisas. A gente tem aqui, em termos de acessibilidade, um stand à esquerda do palco com tradução simultânea, com legendagem, com audiodescrição disponível para vocês pegarem. A gente tem a nossa intérprete de Libras. Eu queria também pedir uma salva de palmas para o trabalho das intérpretes. E sem mais delongas, todo mundo quer. América e África, uma conversa atlântica com Angela Davis e Flávia Oliveira. Por favor, Flávia. Boa noite.
Amigo para ti. Boa noite, Flip. Boa noite, Sesc. Boa noite a vocês. Que alegria, que emoção. É uma honra para mim estar aqui. Vamos lá. Quero agradecer muito a todas as pessoas presentes aqui, nesse lugar lindo, ao ar livre, no Sesc Caborê. Quem está assistindo a gente pela transmissão, quem está assistindo de casa. Muito obrigada pela atenção, pelo interesse. É uma alegria muito grande para mim estar aqui em Paraty, para este encontro em particular. Eu sou a Flávia Oliveira, jornalista na Globo News, no Globo, na Rádio CBN, podcaster no Angu de Grilo. E eu vou ser a facilitadora de um diálogo que inicialmente seria triangular. Infelizmente, o escritor nigeriano, primeiro africano laureado com o Prêmio Nobel de Literatura, Wole Soyinka, não pôde para nós nesta noite. Quis o destino, portanto, eparrei, muito obrigada. Quis o destino, portanto, que a conversa dessa noite ocorresse entre duas mulheres negras, nesse dia de hoje, 25 de julho, Dia da Mulher Negra, Latino-Americana e Caribenha. Dia Internacional das Mulheres Afrodescendentes. Essa foi uma data proposta em 1992, no Encontro de Mulheres Afros em Santo Domingo, na República Dominicana, e hoje é sábado. Em 1992, e posteriormente foi ratificada pela Organização das Nações Unidas, é uma data oficial, reconhecida. No Brasil, é Dia Nacional Teresa de Benguela. Salve ela. Em honra dessa mulher preta que, mais que resistir, ela governou o quilombo do Quariterê, na região onde hoje é o estado do Mato Grosso. Neste 25 de julho, a Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty recebe aqui, no Sesc Caboré, Angela Davis, professora, filósofa, autora de uma dezena de livros, ativista, referência do feminismo preto e do abolicionismo penal. No Brasil, em 2017, para conferências em Salvador e em Cachoeira, cidade onde nasceu minha mãe, no Recôncavo Baiano, a professora Ângela proferiu a frase que comove e inspira todas nós, mulheres negras, não só no Brasil, mas mundo afora. Quando a mulher negra se movimenta, toda a estrutura da sociedade se movimenta com ela. Com vocês, Angela Davis. A microphone for professor. Falta um microfone. Calma, gente.
It works? I guess loud. Yes. Let me turn it down. Okay.
Quem pode fazer um testezinho, só para a gente ver se o aparelhinho, a tradução está funcionando, gente? Fala um oi para mim e para a professora Ângela, por gentileza. Não, é na tradução. Oi! Vocês estão me lembrando aquela história do Rio 2016, eu acho, do PAN, que o presidente do COI foi fazer um discurso e ele falou oi, e era hoje, né? Em espanhol, ele falando em espanhol. Oi, e aí o Maracanã inteiro. Ele, oi, era hoje, era today. Ready? Não?
Bom dia!
Foi.
Let's see. Okay.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Em algum lugar do planeta é bom dia.
Yes, I
Okay.
can. The interpreter is speaking to me now.
Yes? Ok. Então, vamos embora. A proposta dessa conversa era e é tecer reflexões a partir de vivências atlânticas. Lembrem-se, América e África, uma conversa atlântica, é o tema da nossa mesa, da nossa conversa. E eu escolhi elaborar as perguntas à professora Ângela a partir de intelectuais negras e negros forjados no Brasil. Foi a forma que eu encontrei para homenageá-los e reconhecer suas contribuições à luta política, aos estudos sobre racismo, negritude, cultura, meio ambiente, feminismo, ancestralidade. A vocês, pensadores intelectuais negros, referências nossas, essa mesa. Antes de apresentar a primeira questão para a professora, eu gostaria de saber, professora Ângela, se a senhora gostaria de tecer algum comentário sobre a obra do professor Soyinka, que infelizmente não pôde estar aqui com a gente. Eu sei que a senhora estava muito animada com a possibilidade de um primeiro encontro com ele e vinha, inclusive, estudando a obra de Wole Soyinka.
Well, again, good evening, everyone. I should have said montage before. First of all, we're having problems with the technology. Now it's okay. I have to take this off because, yeah, the problem is that I'm getting a lot of feedback in my ear. Well, yeah, perhaps somebody who's working with the technical.
Listen.
You hear all of this stuff.
Okay. Let me change play.
Okay. Sorry. Desculpa.
What about the translator, the interpreter
Coming
here?
Well, yeah, but it's okay. But if we can get this working, it would be better. Okay.
Nós vamos receber aqui a Amanda Gabriele, que é a nossa tradutora e intérprete.
Vou chorar.
Amanda Gabriele é do Sesc RJ. Não é por acaso que ela está aqui, ela estava no meu texto. Serei facilitadora desse diálogo, que terá intermediação valiosa da Amanda Gabriele. Aí ela não vinha e veio, então você tinha que estar aqui, meu amor. Bem-vinda. Somos 3 mulheres negras essa noite. Então, professora, eu vou recomeçar aqui o nosso início. Como a proposta dessa conversa é tecer reflexões a partir das vivências atlânticas, eu escolhi elaborar perguntas a partir de intelectuais negras e negros forjados no Brasil. Foi a forma que encontrei de homenageá-las e reconhecer suas contribuições à luta política e aos estudos sobre racismo, negritude, cultura, meio ambiente, feminismo, ancestralidade. Antes de apresentar a primeira questão, eu gostaria de saber se a professora Ângela quer algum comentário sobre a obra do professor Soyinka. Eu sei que a senhora estava muito animada em encontrá-lo, vinha estudando seus livros, e acho que é adequado a gente prestar essa homenagem, torcendo para um encontro breve com ele, de preferência aqui em Paraty, né, gente? Alô, Sesc.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming out this evening. Oh, it is? Is it that they're
Yes.
getting thank you so much for coming out this evening. I am so happy to see all of you here in Parachi, and I'm so deeply sorry that Professor Wole Soyinka was unable to make the voyage to participate in this conversation this evening. I was especially happy to accept the invitation to come to Parachi when I discovered that Soyinka was going to be part of the conversation. But I do have to admit that Brazil is my favorite place in the world. And I am always happy to accept an invitation to come to Brazil. And I'm especially honored to be able to have this experience here in Parachi, which has so much history. One can almost feel the presence of the ancestors here in this place, which played such a role during the period of slavery. And I always like to point out that many people assume that all conversations about slavery are conversations about violence and repression, about what was done to Black people, to people of African descent. But the Black movement all over this region, South America, North America, this movement has persisted for 500 years. And what is so remarkable about that movement is that Black people discovered in the process of challenging slavery and fighting for freedom how to create beauty, how to create art, how to create music. And I think that that cultural dimension is what we celebrate this evening. And so thank you very much for gathering here this evening.
Nós agradecemos,
And let me
professora.
just say
Thank
one
you.
let me say one other thing. I think we're all sending get well wishes to Professor Wole Soyinka, and we hope that he's able to leave the hospital soon and join us at a future time.
Que assim seja. Saúde, professor, e vem logo. Eu quero começar, então. Eu começo por Beatriz Nascimento, nascida em 1942, morta em 1995. Beatriz Nascimento é historiadora e ativista reconhecida como uma das fundadoras do feminismo negro no Brasil. Ela cunhou o conceito de transmigração como forma de conectar suas experiências às da coletividade étnico-racial, de que faz parte. Num poema de 1989, ela resumiu e cunhou um conceito que a define. Ó paz infinita, poder fazer elos de ligação numa história fragmentada. África e América e novamente Europa e África, Angola, Jagas e os povos do Benin, de onde veio minha mãe. Eu sou Atlântica. Professora, ser Atlântica é um sentimento que a atravessa? Gente, palma para Beatriz Nascimento. Peraí, me ajudem. Olha a beleza dessa brasileira que cunhou esse conceito de ser atlântica. É muito bonito, uma mulher negra, brasileira, pensadora, nordestina, intelectual e sofisticadíssima. E é ela que eu apresento, a professora Ângela. Professora, o que é Atlântica? Esse sentimento lhe alcança?
Well, first of all, let me say that you who live here in Brazil are very fortunate. To live in a place that has taken shape in part as a result of the contributions of great humans like Beatriz Nacimiento. And of course, when she said, Eu sou Atlântica, did I pronounce it correctly? Okay. That she voiced a sentiment that assists all of us to feel a part of larger worlds. One of the difficulties of inhabiting a planet where capitalism literally runs wild and is responsible for repression and destruction and exploitation. One of the problems is that we don't sense a connectedness with others on the planet. And as a matter of fact, let's remember that the nation state itself is a product of capitalism. The nation state is not necessarily the way we as humans should organize our communities on this planet. And so when Beatriz Nacimiento talks about being Atlantic, she's reaching for a larger identity, a larger definition of who she and her compatriots are. I can say that as someone who's been active for a very long time in radical movements, in socialist and communist movements, my first form of enlightenment was internationalism. Growing up in a place that was subject to the regimes of segregation and the worst forms of racism, it was important to know that I could identify with struggles unfolding in other parts of the world. And I will never forget, I often tell this story. I went to France, I went to Paris, because I thought that Paris must be the seat of justice and equality in the world. You know, after all, we all know liberté, égalité, right? Fraternité. And so when I got there, I didn't find the place that I was searching for. That is to say, a place where racism would not determine people's relations with one another. But I discovered the Algerian Revolution. I discovered that people in Paris were, well, you know, first of all, Algerians were under attack by the French military police. And I discovered I could be in solidarity with people in France and in other parts of the world. I discovered France Fanon at that time. I discovered that I could feel a part of something much larger. And I think that is similar to what Beatriz Nacimiento meant when she says, Eu sou Atlântica.
Nossa viagem chega em Lélia Gonzalez, 1935, 1994. Em visita ao Brasil em 2019, numa conferência com a participação da minha mestra, referência, amiga Conceição Evaristo, e que eu também tive a honra de mediar com a senhora no Rio de Janeiro, a professora Ângela declarou: eu aprendo mais com Lélia Gonzalez que vocês comigo. àquela audiência. A socióloga brasileira é referência para o feminismo negro, mas formulou reflexões importantes sobre identidade e pertencimento a partir da interação entre culturas e tradições africanas, indígenas e europeias. É de Leila o conceito de América Ladina, a interseção entre nativos de América, África e Espanha, Península Ibérica. A senhora, professora Ângela, reconhece esse amálgama também nos Estados Unidos? E o que 6 anos depois daquele nosso encontro, a senhora pode compartilhar sobre o aprendizado com Lélia Gonzalez, com a obra de Lélia Gonzalez?
Um, well, first, I love Lelia Gonzalez. Uh, but
And we love you.
But before I talk about Lelia Gonzalez, let me point out that Concesio Evarista is here in the audience this evening, and I feel so honored that she has graced us with her presence. And you have inspired people all over the world. And thank you so much for your beautiful literature. And I think she may be one of the authors that you're planning to mention. Is that right? Uh,
Yes. I will talk about.
So when I think of Lelia Gonzalez, I also think of
I will talk
Conceição
about
Evaristo.
Conceição. She's in my list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. So let me get back to the fact that Lelia Gonzalez has been an inspiration to me for a very long time. I had the opportunity to meet her in 1985 at a conference that took place in Washington, D.C. It was organized by Shirley Chisholm. And perhaps some of you are aware of Shirley Chisholm, a Black woman who was a political figure. And one of the things that she always said is that I am unbought and I am unbossed. But I'll never forget that meeting with Leia Gonzalez. And I continue to be inspired by her to this very day. And there's so much that I have learned from reading Leia Gonzalez, and some of her writings have been available in translation, and there's a new book that was just edited by Kristen Smith that Oh, yeah. But anyway, there are new there's scholars who are working on Lelia Gonzalez, and closer. Is this better? Okay. And I know that many young scholars, especially in the U.S., are working on the ideas of Leia Gonzalez. Of course, Leia Gonzalez belongs in the first place to the people of Brazil, but she also belongs to the world. And her insights regarding the importance of bringing issues together, bringing identities together, long before we thought about a concept of intersectionality that we all use. She argued for Americanity, right? Americanidade.
Americanidade.
And what is so striking to me about that concept is that she recognizes that Black struggles, wherever they have unfolded in this part of the world, could not have happened without the assistance of indigenous people. Uh, and, of course, in 1526, when the very first uprising of enslaved people took place in this part of the world, it was because of the assistance of indigenous people. And also, when we think about Black struggles, we're not only referring to struggles that Black people have led and engaged in. Um, how can I put it? The Black liberation movement is far broader than the Black community. I'm thinking about a figure in our history in the U.S., a Japanese American woman who was uh, um, one of the most important interlocutors of Malcolm X, Yuri Koshiyama, and she was actually with Malcolm X when he was assassinated. And there's a well-known photograph of Malcolm dying on the stage of the Audubon Hotel in Harlem. And Yuri is cradling him. It's so interesting that that photograph has not circulated in the way that it should have, because it must be assumed that it's not a legible photograph. What is a Japanese American woman doing comforting Malcolm as he dies? And I think we forget about those connections, which are real. And in fact, I knew Yuri quite well, and she was one of the most active people in the Black struggle of all the people I've ever known. So I want us to distinguish between the struggles and the communities that they involve, and those who participate in and push those struggles forward. And I think I've learned in part to do that by reading and thinking about Alelia Gonzalez. Now, another, I tend to go on and on. I tend to talk too much.
No,
And I know you have
por
a lot
favor.
of questions,
Pode.
but I do want to say that Leila Gonzalez's critique of capitalism is something that we desperately need today, especially in the era of the first trillionaire. Uh, and especially because we have billionaires, trillionaires who are exploiting the earth and who care about nothing other than making more money, regardless of the consequences, and who are not only responsible for exploiting human beings, but exploiting all of the resources of the earth to the extent that environmental exploitation is so bad that there may not be in the future an earth available to humans or animals or plants. And I mention that because I had the opportunity to talk to a number of participants and struggles here in Karachi. And I was
Professora, vamos voltar só um pouquinho, que a gente vai chegar nesse livro aqui. Para a gente Só para a gente, já que a senhora introduziu o tema do meio ambiente, já que a senhora introduziu o tema do meio ambiente, eu quero ir a Milton Santos. Milton Santos é um geógrafo brasileiro, mundial. Este seria. Estamos celebrando o centenário de nascimento de Milton Santos nesse ano, e esse grande geógrafo brasileiro trouxe muitas contribuições sobre desigualdade socioterritorial, que é exatamente o que a senhora está mencionando. Ele é a ideia de que existem apenas duas classes sociais, a dos que não comem e a dos que não dormem com medo da revolução dos que não comem. E também, e aí é o ponto exato que a senhora tratava, subestimar a necessidade de preservar o meio ambiente é caminhar para a extinção. Eu trago o Milton Santos justamente para que a senhora aborde essa crítica ao capitalismo, à concentração de renda dele decorrente. Como é que a gente busca esperança num mundo que enriquece tão poucos, que vulnerabiliza populações inteiras e exaure o meio ambiente? Para a gente não perder o gancho, porque a senhora emendou Lélia Gonzalez com Milton Santos, eu queria lhe ouvir mais intensamente sobre esse ambiente de extrema desigualdade.
Well, first of all, thank you for resituating that issue. Um, uh, because, all of the amazing thinkers and activists you are evoking from the recent history of Brazil, they're all connected and their issues are all connected. Uh, and that if we raise one issue, we have to raise all of the issues. And I apologize for being a little quick to try to make those connections. But I wanted to point out that at a very exciting gathering of activists from here in Parachi, we had the opportunity last night to hear about uh, what's going on in this area. And of course, at this literary festival, we should not only focus on the literature, but we should also focus on the role that the literature plays in enlightening people and particularly in serving as a motivation to engage in the kinds of struggles that will bring more democracy and freedom to our worlds, to the planet, right here to Parachi. And I was just given this wonderful book. I'm trying to learn Portuguese now, but it's going to be a long process. But I can say that the title of the book is Parque de Mangueira e Ilha das Cobras. O tradicional na territorialidade contemporânea de Parachi. Well, anyway.
Parque das Mangueiras e Ilha das Cobras, o tradicional na territorialidade contemporânea de Paraty, é o livro que a professora recebeu de Miriam do Nascimento Machado. É ela a autora.
Well, thank you so much, Flávia. And I promised that I would say a few words this evening about the gentrification that is happening in poor communities here in Parachi, about the gentrification and and also about the environmental racism, which young people are telling us that we have to be concerned about the environment all over the world, or else they will have no future. There will be no future for life on this planet. And so developers right here in Parachi are attempting to create the means of gaining more profit while they are pushing people off their land, off oftentimes off their ancestral lands, and they are poisoning the earth. So you heard the title of the book. If you didn't understand me when I read it, then you understood Flavia when she read it. I hope I hope that you will pick this book up. I understand it had a launch here at the festival, so it's uh,
Exact moment. The book is being launched in this exact moment. That's what she's saying.
oh okay. Apparently, the book is being launched here at the festival at this exact moment. Oh.
Saímos de Milton Santos para Antônio Bispo dos Santos, Nego Bispo, 1959, 2023. Nego Bispo foi um filósofo forjado num território quilombola. Uma das suas contribuições é o conceito de confluência. Um rio não deixa de ser um rio porque conflui com outro rio. Ao contrário, ele passa a ser ele mesmo e outros rios. Ele se fortalece. Quando a gente confluencia, a gente não deixa de ser a gente passa a ser a gente e outra gente. Ele ensinou. É dele também a frase: quem não sabe dançar e cantar no batuque, quem não sabe fazer uma comida, quem não se emociona com a cantiga de um pássaro, não tem um modo agradável de viver. Nos últimos dias, professora, a senhora encontrou ativistas locais aqui da região de Paraty e ainda hoje visitou o Quilombo do Campinho. Quilombo do Campinho é o primeiro território quilombola titulado no estado do Rio de Janeiro. O que a senhora levou e o que recebeu no contato com esses territórios tradicionais? Rolou confluência, professora Ângela?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for introducing me to Nego Bispo. I can't wait to read his work. I suppose I should intensify my studies of Portuguese in order to do this all important reading. I I love the idea of confluence uh, and that identities become stronger when they merge with others. Unfortunately, during this period, the assumption is that one is one thing to the exclusion of something else. I can remember, in terms of my own experience, that when I was involved in the Black movement and also in the emerging, what was called the emerging feminist movement, women's movement. And so oftentimes I got asked, well, what are you? Are you a Black person or are you a woman? Of course, that makes no sense. But it helps us to understand how our concepts don't always reflect the social realities that we are attempting to grasp with those concepts. Oftentimes, the concepts make it more difficult to live in the world that is distorted by these notions of necessary separation. So I think that the whole idea of confluence that we get from Nego Bispo is especially important during this period. It's one that we should link together with Beatriz Nascimiento's notion of being Atlantic. It's one that we should connect with Lydia Gonzalez's notion of Americanity and the coming together of three cultures and three ways of being. And what I want to say here is that we are far stronger than those who pretend to rule us. Fascism is on the rise in the U.S. and in Europe, here in Latin America, but not among the people. I think we are unaware of our strength because our conception of power oftentimes involves uh, um, those who are elected to office. Now, I think we should elect good people to office. And I know that you all have a task before you here in Brazil. I know that you cannot allow the son of, what's his name? And, we in turn, a few years from now, we in turn cannot allow, what's his name, who's in the office of the presidency of the U.S. now, to influence who comes after. But, hmm? I know his name. There's an African tradition that is attached to naming processes, and the name accords strength. By naming something, you give it power. And so, therefore, I refuse to name those who need to be out of power. But there is a name that I will mention. I don't know a lot about the other elections that will take place, but I do know that Aniele Franco is running for Congress here. And I do know that she is dedicated to continue the legacy of her sister, Marielle Franco. And I think I'd better stop because I'll get into all of the other questions, won't I?
Vamos para o próximo, professora. A próxima é a Conceição Evaristo. Essa grande dama da literatura brasileira, que completa 80 anos neste 2026. Com base no conceito que ela criou chamado escrevivência, a escrita que nasce do cotidiano, das lembranças, da experiência de vida da própria autora e do seu povo, do nosso povo, ela compõe romances, contos, poemas que revelam a condição do afrodescendente no Brasil, dos afrodescendentes no Brasil. É dela a frase: a nossa escrevivência não pode ser lida como história de ninários da Casa Grande, e sim para incomodá-los em seus sonos injustos. Em que medida, professora, as suas vivências pessoais se apresentam na sua produção acadêmica e literária. E aí, particularmente, eu lhe pergunto o quanto a experiência da prisão nos anos 70 ela forjou seu ativismo contra o encarceramento em massa, forjou o seu abolicionismo, ou a abolicionista penal que é a Angela Davis. Deixa eu só contar uma pequena história, porque antes de a gente começar aqui, Dona Conceição fez uma visita ao camarim e contou para a Angela Davis que nos anos 70 ela se deixou o Black Power a partir de uma foto de Angela Davis que ela tinha em casa. Ela disse que na próxima encarnação ela quer ser Nina Simone e Toni Morrison juntas. Conceição é esse amálgama, né? Professora Ângela.
Well, Conceição, I would put you on the same level with Nina Simone and Toni Morrison. And I would say in my next life, I want to be born as all three of you together. Uh, but thank you so much for this concept of escrevivencia. Escrevivencia, is that right? Um, because, in part, because it took such a long time for us to recognize that we need to share our own stories. As you know, in the whole history of Black writing in the U.S., the whole question of whether one was a writer or a Black writer continued to be raised. The assumption of on the part of the racist literary regime was that one had to strive to become a writer, not a Black writer. Toni Morrison demonstrated that white experience is not universal. I should say is not universal. Although there are experiences that white literary figures write about that speak to all of us. And of course, she demonstrated more than anyone else at that time that Black experience can have a universal dimension, that everybody can be moved by Black experience. And so I thank you so much for this concept. And to answer the question, or to begin to answer the question, yeah, I had no idea when I was arrested in 1970 by the FBI that I was about to embark upon a series of experiences that would be absolutely formative. A friend of mine, one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party, Erica Huggins, once talked about her incarceration as a gift. And so I borrow that from her. That as difficult as it was to face the death penalty 3 times, to be sought by the FBI and to spend time in jail not knowing what the outcome would be. When I look back at that period now, I realize that it was also a gift, that the rest of my life has been shaped by what happened in those jails, by my interchanges and my exchanges with the women who were incarcerated as well. I never thought that this would shape the rest of my life. I'm just finishing a book, which is the second volume of a book called Abolition, Politics, Practices, Promises. And I'm thinking that the majority of the work that I have done, both in terms of my activist experience and in terms of my academic work, has been work that relates one way or another with the question of the prison and its abolition. And so I could say that I'm, now, as difficult as it was at the time, especially when I thought I might be put to death because we had the death penalty in California. And even though I was not guilty, there were people like Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon and others, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI at the time, who were convinced that I would be sentenced to death and that I would be put to death. So I always say that out of that experience came the lesson that when people come together across national borders, we can stand up to even the most powerful figures in the world because they were convinced that I was going to be put to death. And millions of people, from Brazil to France to Japan to Vietnam to South Africa. I mean, I could name places all over the world. People said, no, we will not allow our sister to be executed. And you won. It was, people always evoked that time and asked me about the struggle. And I said, well, I didn't do very much. I was sitting in jail. It was people on the outside who did all of the work, who got the petitions signed, who participated in the rallies, that they generated that power and that force that made it impossible for these most powerful men in the world to prevail. And I think that is what we need to do today. We need to build movements like that will prevent those in power from moving forward with their agendas of fascism and racial capitalism.
Obrigada, professor. Eu vou mexer mais uma vez na ordem da no nosso roteiro para introduzir Marielle Franco. 1979, 2018. A senhora falou dessa sua experiência. A senhora falou dessa sua experiência e da Aliança Global para salvá-la da morte. Marielle foi assassinada com seu motorista Anderson Gomes em março de 2018, vereadora carioca no exercício do mandato, e esse caso ganhou repercussão global, inclusive uma adesão muito forte sua, de Angela Davis. Marielle foi vítima de feminicídio político, que é um conceito elaborado pela Renata Souza, comunicadora, doutora em comunicação e deputada. Uma de suas frases mais significativas foi: "Não serei interrompida". A Beatriz Nascimento, professora, foi assassinada pelo companheiro de uma amiga que ela tentava proteger da violência doméstica, em 1995. O feminicídio, que é hoje um crime tipificado no Código Penal brasileiro, tem crescido muito nos últimos anos. Em 2025, foram 1.571 casos registrados no Brasil, 4 mulheres assassinadas por serem mulheres a cada dia. Como é que a senhora vê esses índices de violência contra mulheres, em particular contra mulheres negras? Falar um pouco de, tristemente, né, de violência homicida. Aliás, eu quero juntar a esse tema a violência racial, que também é uma chaga no Brasil e nos Estados Unidos. Na quarta-feira passada, foi assassinado pela polícia, 6 anos após George Floyd, mais um homem negro, Corey Ruiz, de 38 anos, no estado de Wisconsin. A gente continua vendo esse ambiente de intensa violência contra mulheres e violência também contra pessoas negras.
Yeah, thank you, so much for raising this question of violence against women uh, all over the world. And of course, when we say violence against women, we are not excluding um, anyone who identifies in that way. And we mean, in the very first place, Black women. We mean trans women. Uh, and, some people might ask, well, why are you emphasizing uh, the women who might be in the numerical minority? Uh, So why don't you look at the women in the U.S.? Of course, white women are in the majority, and if you want to uh, express this desire to end femicide, why don't you attach it to those who are in the majority? Uh, but I think we've learned that women who are already at the bottom of the hierarchy in our societies are the ones who suffer most. And we know that Black trans women, uh, probably here in Brazil, but I know also in the U.S., suffer violence to a far greater extent than any other group of women. And I'm not suggesting that we need to quantify it in that way, because anytime a woman of any racial background, of any class, is harmed, that is violence that we need to abolish. But what I want to say is that violence against women now is the most pervasive violence on the planet. And let's think about violence against women in the most capacious way. That is to say, violence, intimate violence, violence that happens within relationships, what we often call domestic violence, um, the kind of uh, uh, violence that gets expressed in the context of communities that are saturated with violence. But also, let's think about state violence. Let's think about the connections between intimate violence and the violence that is meted out to women who are incarcerated, women who are subject to police violence, And not only women, police violence itself, carceral violence itself increases the extent to which women will be subjected to violence. If we live in a violent society where it is okay to uh, uh, assault, officially assault, for police to officially assault, for prison guards to officially assault anyone, then that increases the measure of violence in our world. And it encourages those who unfortunately resort to violence within the context of their intimate relationships. So we cannot think about getting rid of domestic violence. And I think Marielle Franco understood this because she took a stand against the military police. She took a stand against the violence that was meted out to communities. And she understood the relationship with the violence that it supported and encouraged on an individual level, on an intimate level. This is the feminist approach. This is what we call an abolition feminist approach, that we recognize the connections that oftentimes move from one dimension of our lives into other dimensions, that we cannot think about isolating those dimensions, and we cannot assume that is the way to rid our world of the violence that humans uh, inflict on each other, and especially that the violence that is inflicted on women all over the planet. But we cannot get rid of intimate violence if we don't also get rid of carceral violence. That is the thrust of our theories of abolition and abolition feminism. And Marielle Franco, more than anyone else, represents the need to make those connections. And as we do work today to demilitarize the police, for example, we think about Marielle, and we know that even though she was killed on that fateful day, and the 10th anniversary um, will take place soon, in the next couple of days, I think, on the anniversary of her. Yes.
O assassinato de Marielle completou 8 anos em março deste ano. Foi dia 14 de março de 2018. Segunda-feira, 27, seria aniversário dela, de nascimento, 27 de julho.
Well, let us all say thank you, Marielle. Obrigada, Marielle Franco.
A senhora gosta de futebol, professora?
I'm learning how to like soccer. Did watch the World Cup, and I rooted for Brazil.
Eu queria trazer o professor Hélio Santos, pesquisador, professor, ativista, histórico do movimento negro brasileiro, que lançou recentemente o livro 14 de Maio, com reflexões sobre a ausência de políticas de inclusão no pós-abolição no Brasil, 1888. Nesta semana, em razão da Copa do Mundo, ele fez um comentário sobre o protagonismo de jogadores negros em seleções europeias de ponta, Espanha incluída, campeã da Copa de 2026, incluindo também a seleção dos Estados Unidos. 1/4 dos jogadores do Mundial deste ano não nasceu nos países pelos quais jogaram, mais de 200 jogadores. A interação, essa presença, esse protagonismo negro, essa diversidade se dá ao mesmo tempo em que a extrema-direita avança com um discurso xenofóbico, políticas anti-imigração, de encarceramento e até de deportações para países terceiros. Como é que a senhora vê essa contradição, ao mesmo tempo em que se festeja e celebra a diversidade, por exemplo, de seleções de futebol, a gente percebe o crescimento da xenofobia, e eu não sei se nesse trecho a senhora gostaria de falar da Palestina, da faixa de Gaza, que eu sei que é um assunto, tema de pesquisas.
Um, yeah, don't we live in a contradictory world? Um, First of all, technology is so advanced that workers should be subjected to increasingly um, smaller measures of exploitation. The technological advances are now capable of sustaining the idea of a 4-hour work week. And I just want to say this because, this is 2026. And we see, everybody's walking around with these devices that are capable of communicating with people all over the world and taking photographs and sharing those photographs instantaneously and videos of, well, you know what I'm referring to. But why haven't we advanced in our sense of what it means to be a human community? Excuse me. I reflect on this sometimes. I remember reading Marx and reading about the way in which he described the struggles of working people over time, and that those struggles are far for a larger portion of the products of the work. Workers create everything that allow us to live, yet they are not the ones who benefit from that process. And so Marx writes about the fact that they struggle for an ever larger portion of the products that they create. So that manifests in the struggle for a shorter work day. So at first it was, say, a 16-hour workday, then 14-hour workday, and then 12-hour workday, and then 10-hour workday, and then 8-hour workday, and now we should be at the 4-hour workday. But somehow it got stuck, except in a few places in Europe where they experimented with shortening the workday. And I mention this because we are totally out of step with the technology that has developed. And that means that um, that we have to figure out how we're going to seize the reins of history again. Um, and we were talking about, help me now, we were talking about Eli Santos
Hélio Santos.
and soccer, and we were talking about the fact that there have been demands for inclusion and there is more inclusiveness, and the example that you gave have to do with the examples have to do with the fact that there are so many African and Latin American um, football players. I know you say football, right? uh, Playing for European and U.S. teams, uh, but that inclusion by itself does not accomplish anything unless structures change. And I was giving the example of the workday because that is a structure that should have changed a long time ago. And there would be less poverty. There would be more time, more leisure time, more time for working people to attend to read the books that are on display at this festival. Uh, this we're out of sync with what we should be doing as humans. Uh, and of course, it has to do with the rise of the billionaires and there's somebody else whose name I really do not like to mention, who has become the first trillionaire on the planet. You know who I'm talking about, uh, right? The South African Canadian. And I forgot his name as well. Like I forgot the name of the person who used to be your president and the son of whom is now running for office. Um, but I think that that we should take into consideration that those are the people, they are the reasons why life is so difficult for so many people around the world, why structures of racism are still effective in producing more profit. Uh, and I don't think that they represent the future of this world. They want to think that they represent the future. And as a matter of fact, I think that Elio Santos had, if he were asked about the direction we're heading, he would point to what has happened here in Brazil over the last decades. And, you know, I know that when we're ensconced in struggles, we often fail to celebrate our victories. We can't, we see that which we have to get rid of. And we don't necessarily celebrate that which we have achieved by virtue of our um, our struggles, our protests. And you know, I would tell Helio Santos that I'm really inspired by what has happened in Brazil. Um, Not that I don't recognize how much further you need to go and how many problems there still are in this country. But I can remember the first time I visited Brazil, uh, there were there was no affirmative action. There were very few Black people at the university. I remember that. I was here, and I have watched a new university system develop in Bahia, and I've seen changes that are palpable, and I think you should celebrate those changes because you are the ones who achieve them. But when we celebrate these victories, we do not rest content with those victories. We use them as launching pads to continue the struggle. And I think here in Brazil, you're really positioned to do that well. And I know people all over the world are inspired by the Black women's marches that take place. Yes.
Yes. Professora, a gente tem 6 minutos e eu teria 2 perguntas nesses 6 minutos. Vamos ver se vamos conseguir. Gente, Abdias Nascimento, 1914, 2011. Em 1944, Abdias Nascimento fundou o Teatro Experimental do Negro, um marco na luta pela valorização da cultura, da história, da dignidade da população negra brasileira. Seu objetivo não era apenas denunciar o racismo, mas ampliar horizontes, fortalecer identidades, criar oportunidades e construir um futuro melhor para próximas gerações. A senhora, em Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, analisa o trabalho das cantoras Bessie Smith, Gertrude Mulroney e Billie Holiday como ferramentas de consciência feminista e resistência de mulheres negras. Está escrevendo com a professora Gina Dent, aqui também. Bem-vinda, professora. E Terry Lyne Carrington, um livro sobre a pianista Gary Allen. Como é que a senhora vê o papel da arte, da educação e da cultura nessa luta? Para a gente terminar com para cima, né? Eu preciso lhe contar que Elza Soares, uma grande cantora americana, ela foi escolhida cantora do milênio. Ela tinha a senhora como referência, professora Angela Davis. O Pedro Loureiro, o empresário da Elza, que nos deixou em 2022, ele me ligou ontem para contar isso, que Elza Soares era uma grande fã de Angela Davis e contou que o álbum que ela gravou pouco antes de falecer e que saiu depois da sua morte foi inspirado na senhora. O nome do livro se chama, o nome do álbum se chama No Tempo da Intolerância. Como a gente tem pouco tempo, eu vou juntar a Sueli Carneiro, filósofa e ativista, referência do movimento de mulheres negras no Brasil. Em sua obra, eu acho que a senhora vai gostar disso, ela tem defendido a radicalização da democracia em prol do combate ao racismo, à misoginia e para a construção da justiça social. Professora Ângela, além de falar de educação e cultura, a senhora acredita nessa democracia plena, na construção dessa democracia, na construção da democracia, na democracia plena, na democracia radical que nos apresenta Sueli Carneiro?
Well, I know it's the last question, and I'm sorry that we can't spend more time with you. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know about you, but I think it's very important that you're ending this conversation with some reflections about the role of art and literature and music, the dimension of culture, and how that is connected to our quest for justice and equality. I yeah, some years ago, well, quite a few years ago, exactly. Everything now is just some years ago. Uh, one of the advantages of growing old is that you develop perspective. You recognize that things can change, and what I would like to say, you evoked Palestine, uh, and I can't remember the context in which you uh, evoked this about Helio Santos. Okay, uh, I was going to share with you that I'm someone who's been involved, uh, an active participant in struggles for solidarity with Palestine for the majority of my life. Since I was a college student, since I was at the university, uh, since the latter 1960s. I mean, I remember the 67 war, and I've been involved in that effort to generate solidarity for the people of Palestine ever since then. And I say this because for a very long time, it appeared as if it was impossible to shift world opinion, which was in support of the state of Israel. And but I remember here in Brazil, I remember being in Cruz das Almas and giving a talk there at the opening of the new university system, and more people applauded uh, for the comments that I made about the need for solidarity with Palestine than anything else in my talk. So I love Brazil for many, many, many reasons. I love Brazil for its music and its culture, but I also love Brazil for your um, political astuteness and your capacity to see through ideology. Not everyone, because we know, but we don't have time to be as specific as we should be, because uh, this program is almost done. Um, but I, Elsa Suarez, wow, I'm very moved, and I've always seen a connection between the cultural dimension, the music, the literature of Brazil, and your capacity to create the kinds of movements that do bring about real change. Um, and I remember on my second trip to Brazil, Gina and I were in Bahia, in Salvador, uh, and we had been invited by Angela Figueiredo, who is somewhere in the audience. Where are you, Angela? Oh, there she is. And so we were expecting to teach. Well, of course, we did teach. Gina and I co-taught a course. Uh, uh, so we said, um, well, these are academics, so they're probably not going to be as Brazilian as we might want. But anyway, the first night we were there, um, Angela gives us a call and says, we have to go party. Uh, I think it was midnight or something like that. And we had just arrived. And so we went out to a concert by Margarita Menezes, yeah, and spent the rest of the evening until the dawn hours enjoying her music and dancing and realizing that we could not do samba and all of that. Uh, but there's something about the nature of music and art and literature that allows us to achieve dimensions that are unavailable otherwise. And I always like to think of uh, art as being in the forefront of struggles, revolutionary struggles for change, because oftentimes we're not sure what exactly we're fighting for. We know we want freedom. We know we want an end to repression. We know we want an end to racism. We know we want an end to working class exploitation and to heteropatriarchy, uh, an end to xenophobia, homophobia. We know all of that. But we haven't been able to express it in ways that capture what it is we think we're fighting for. What would a society without, all of those forms of oppression look like? How would one describe it? And perhaps we haven't learned yet how to describe it. But art allows us to experience what it feels like. Um, and do you understand what I'm saying? Those moments, you know, um, um, dancing in Brazil uh, gives with others, gives you a sense of a kind of community in which there is joy that is indescribable. And that is the kind of world we want. And so I think, your question about the role of music and art and literature, and of course, we have so many people here in the audience who are probably trying to figure out. At least who are interested in literature, but are trying to figure out the relationship of that literature. Stories, the kinds of stories that Concepcion Evarista writes about, that they move us and they allow us to feel powerful, and they allow us to imagine what it might be like to live in a world that is free.
Eu conversei com Angela Davis. Muito obrigada, professora. Thank you. Eu queria chamar o palco enquanto vocês aplaudem. Podem aplaudir. Falar que foi um privilégio estar aqui essa noite, participar desse encontro, trazer esses nomes, essa memória, reverenciar os nossos, ouvir Angela Davis. E para fazer o encerramento dessa noite, que eu já considero histórica, eu tenho a honra de convidar ao palco o grande responsável pela realização desse encontro, desse evento e várias outras iniciativas que fazem parte de um arcabouço para fortalecer a cultura no Brasil. É um entusiasta do desenvolvimento socioeconômico, cultural no estado do Rio de Janeiro. Foi fundamental para trazer Angela Davis para esse encontro gratuito com a gente na Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. Convido o presidente do Sistema Fé Comércio RJ, Antônio Florencio de Queiroz Júnior, por favor. É ele que vai fazer a nossa despedida, o nosso encerramento. Gostou?
Muito. Amei.
Bonito, né?
Show. Show. Boa noite a todos e a todos. Eu gostaria de agradecer a presença de todos. Essa iniciativa nossa faz parte do nosso dia a dia. O Sesc é uma entidade de inclusão e fazemos isso diariamente. Perdão, estou nervoso, desculpa. Mas dizer que o Sesc, como entidade de inclusão, tem muito orgulho em poder ter trazido a Angela Davis, proporcionar às pessoas ouvi-la, que nós temos que vivenciar e enxergar toda essa página horrível da nossa história e que nós temos que fazer diariamente um trabalho para apagar na mente e da história esse período tão triste em que vivemos. Infelizmente, o racismo, a discriminação, ele não acabou, longe disso, mas eu tenho certeza, se cada um de nós, dentro do nosso universo, trabalhar para isso, nós vamos conseguir. E nós, no Sesc, no Brasil inteiro, fazemos isso. Então, muito obrigado a todos.
Oi. Boa noite a todos, todas. Eu quero muito, enfim, agradecer também essa presença de vocês. Voltem em segurança para casa, com calma, se dirigindo à porta de entrada por onde vocês acessaram, a saída pelo mesmo lugar, tá bem? E voltamos para casa com esse sentimento de manter esses sonhos, essas vozes que foram evocadas aqui hoje, a manter a grandeza delas cada vez maior, é isso. Deixar o grande maior, é isso. Viva Angela Davis! Viva Angela Davis! Aê! Flávia Oliveira! E ao Sesc! E a vocês, obrigada, boa noite!